you get an insane amount of value every time you do a lift where you push it extra hard. When you bring it just a few degrees beyond what you normally do, because for one, it's gonna feel good and you're gonna definitely make gains from that lift because you did a good lift, but also it just opens your eyes to like, oh shit, okay, I can bring it, I can go this hard. And after you say I can go this hard, it'll turn into I should go this hard, you know? But the reverse is true too, right? If you have a shit lift and you basically just put yourself in your place by saying, oh, what the fuck is wrong with me right now? You know, I've had lifts like that, late, public gym, whatever. Like, it's just a self-realization of every time you get comfortable, you know? So I never want to take like my ability to totally kill it on a step-by-step basis for granted. Because every time I come to the gym, I'm basically being tested. Now it's like a self-imposed test, of course, on can I really get after it? And as long as every day I can, I get to go home feeling like a freaking winner. You gotta change it up, man, you know? Because the more you think you've found the answer, the less likely it is you're going to be to actually, you know, be influenced by any new ideas, because you're so like blinders on, like what you're doing is perfect, nothing else is going to help. That's not a constructive mindset, right? Be open to new ideas, you know, don't be so, I'm not saying one method is better than any other, but just don't get so attached to your own like preconceptions of working out that you completely neglect to listen to any good advice or tips, or even just like influences from seeing how other people work out. Because, you know, this isn't a battle of supremacy of styles and approaches, right? This is, as far as I'm concerned, with the bodybuilding, fitness, muscle, everything, it's kind of a team endeavor where we're all trying to get on the same page, or at least similar pages, of what works. Because why are we coming to the gym, right? Obviously it's got its own physical benefits and like just mental, like it's good for you to move around and shit. But if we were to like computerize it, like task versus end goal, we're working out to make progress. So I think that's something we need to maybe join forces on a little more, right? Rather than this, you know, who's right and who's wrong. You know, let's praise what's right and then just at least question what's wrong. And, you know, who's to say some guy has his own weird approach, but for him it works? How are you going to tell him anything if it's actually legitimately working for him, especially if you're coming at him in like a friggin', you know, argumentative way, all right? The last thing that's going to result in new ideas and better lifters and a better consensus on just working out in general is two meatheads who are clashing because he likes doing curls this way and he likes doing curls this way. Foolishness, right? Get your lifts in, make progress, and chill. That's my finisher statement for this lift. That's not a bad idea to look at yourself posing if you're like, you know, concerned with your own kind of like self-perception of your progress. Because looking at yourself fully pumped, cool lighting, veiny, pre-workout, that's extra cool. You know what I'm saying? But that's temporary, right? That's just a, what would that be, right? You just took a damn, you know, invincibility star in Mario Kart. Right? You're extra fancy for a minute, right? But then you got to go back to normal. You know, but what I was kind of getting at was, you know, what's your highlight reel of the day, or of the last few weeks, or the last few months, you know, or of however long? Because when it comes to like seeing anybody who's getting some shit done, be it, you know, like social media character, bodybuilder guys, fitness dudes, you know, just anything, right? Car show kind of guys who love working on whatever, the ratio of cool shit that's like interesting and just fun to show off and like make videos about, or just like, you know, just be able to look at, that is about, I'd say maybe 2% seems a little low. Definitely less than 10% of the amount of like prep and just other related work that goes on that is not so fun and interesting. You know what I'm saying, right? For every insane set of squats, there is, you know, sitting around in front of a bowl of chicken and rice, or, you know, just doing 30 minutes of cardio. I mean, let's even be conservative and say I've only done, well, I mean, I've had stints where I wasn't doing my daily cardio, that's for sure. But I mean, even a year, let's say 1 year, which, I mean, I've been doing it longer than that, but just 1 year of 30 minutes of cardio a day. So that's, let's even just cut it down to 300, let's just say 300 days out of 365. That's nearly, I think that's like 6 days a week-ish, maybe 5.5 technically. But either way, around 5 or 6 days a week at 30 minutes of cardio, right? So 300 times half an hour, 150 hours straight of sitting on the bike pedaling over the course of just a year. You know, that's not even counting the freaking like 2-month period earlier in prep when I was doing 2 hours a day. So even right then, that was like 120. Like in a 2-month period, I feel like I've, I mean, honestly, you know, it's kind of sad to say, but in that 2-month period of doing 2 hours of cardio a day, that's more cardio than anyone's ever done in their life. Well, not anyone, but some people. You know what I'm saying? But that's not really, that's not cool. You know, you're not going to make a TikTok edit out of sitting on the bike pedaling, right? That's just not really, but it's something that is important for the grand scheme of what I'm working toward. So, of course, I'm going to do it, right? And you know, it's there's a certain kind of just understanding that it doesn't have to be the flashiest thing in the world, because it's just necessary, right? We're all looking at, let me think here. Right? I mean, it's cool to be the architect. Like, oh, I designed this building. I designed the Empire State Building. Look at this mock-up. Oh, it's incredible. I did that. Not so glamorous to be the dude laying rebar and, you know, pouring concrete, right? Because it's slower. It's not as interesting. It's just, you know, I don't want to say grunt work, because obviously there's a lot of prep involved, but it's just necessary small steps that scale towards something greater. You know what I'm saying? So if we're only watching, like if you're like me when I was looking up to all the Callum von Moger videos, or like who else was I watching? Honestly, I wasn't really a die-hard bodybuilding fan until I really got into it. But I mean, I was watching a lot of like Rich Piana sort of stuff. But you know, insert whoever you were looking up to when they're showing their coolest stuff, and just, you know, deadlift compilations, and just like crazy poses when they're extra lean. I mean, that's not them 24/7. Right? I mean, don't forget, every time, you know, some dude finishes a crazy ass, you know, workout or bodybuilding show or just anything, the guy's gonna go home, chill, play on his phone, just like you are. And so it's, what I'm trying to say is, it doesn't have to be this 24-hour, like, always on, just cool shit, fun all the time, extra, like, in this, in kind of in relation to the cooler part of like coming in, hitting a serious pose, just looking nuts, maybe going into competitions, anything else like that, PRs. You know, there's just what you might call, you know, chores that just go along with it, that, you know, even though they're not as cool, they're still necessary, right? So I guess I'm trying to put more emphasis on the things that aren't really so just interesting and cool, and because they kind of they're just necessary for the sake of making a certain level of progress in whatever other kind of thing you're doing, right? So that's my sort of thing. Even if I'm, you know, just doing 30 minutes in the scheme of my whole working out, 1 day of cardio will change nothing, right? If I went back over the course of everything and I skipped 1 day of cardio, or 1 lift, or even like 1 week of cardio, it's not going to change anything. Right? But it's the fact that there's been so many in a row that now it's kind of just scaled up to where it is, right? So don't get discouraged, and just don't prioritize the cool shit. You know, everybody's always, oh man, I want to start posting, I want to start, you know, making whatever, I want to start hitting PRs. How many working, you know, strength building sets does it take to reach a 315 bench? You know, how many workouts, how many years does it take to get to a 4-plate squat for, like, you know, 5 or 6 reps? You know, that's not the fun part, right? But if you can at least get yourself to a point where you're not being, like, you know, turned off or just discouraged by the fact that it's a lot before you get to the cool stuff, then you're good. You know, my thing is, I've always been like, I've almost got
I don't want to say imposter. No, that's not the right word I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of, like, I feel a little bit hypocritical when I say that sometimes, because for me, like, the workouts just coming in, like, that's the fun part, you know? So everything else that happens afterward, it's, you know, it's just, I don't want to say a byproduct, but it's just a nature of course, you know? So if you know somebody who loves working out, guess what? The guy's probably going to look like it, at least after a certain period of, you know, gaining experience and making real ass freaking gains. You know, so my whole thing, and this is like half just how it is, but it's definitely how I like that it is because, you know, the grind aspect of working out, where we're talking like, you know, legs, failure, sweating, cardio, diet, food, everything, like, that's the fun part, you know? So then the results are even more fun because they're like, like, it just kind of happens. You know, you're going on a freaking stroll and you happen to find $20 on the sidewalk, right? That might not be the best kind of way to put it, but that's, I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. I find it very interesting that it's such a craze. And I know I've been saying this forever. I will get over this whole training ideology, you know, BS phase, but it's I see it so much I can't stop talking about it. But as much as I see people trying to make sure they optimize every tiny little bit of their training and their workouts, and, you know, full body every other day, and fatigue, and just, I don't hear cardio getting thrown around at all. Like, honestly, I have never, I've never seen pillars of, you know, the workout optimization, you know, side of things doing any cardio. I've never seen it. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm sure it has, but I don't see it talked about. And the cardio, I think, is kind of a sort of a slept-on stat to work on and build up, because it plays into everything else. You know, when I'm talking 30 minutes of cardio, that might not seem like a lot. And in terms of overall workload, I mean, it really wasn't. You know, I'd kind of put cardio, oh goodness, in you know, kind of a more mindless category of training, because as long as you do it at your intended intensity, set the difficulty, pedal at, you know, the same consistent RPM, that's all you have to think about. And really, I'm actually trying not to think about it by playing on my phone and, like, just distracting myself, or like watching a show or a movie or something, so that it just kind of, you know, happens without my sort of conscious effort, right? So I mean, it's like nothing, you know. It's like you're folding your laundry and you're watching Breaking Bad for the 8th time at the same, you know, while you're doing it. It just makes it go by quicker, and it might seem mindless, but it plays into everything else, right? Let's talk direct gym performance. You're gonna have better workouts. Someone who has good cardio will not be as winded from their sets, and will be able to recover faster in between, you know, get their heart rate down. Okay, all right, I'm ready to hit it one more time. And during their sets, it might not be so important with, you know, lower weight or lower volume, higher weight sets. You know, you're not really testing anybody's cardiovascular ability by, you know, doing a 1 rep max. That's just at the extreme. I wouldn't do that. But let's say you're doing squats. Look, man, my heart rate gets freaking crazy high during a set of squats, and my oxygen load, like the demand for oxygen in my body, is basically probably as high as it ever is after or right during the peak of a set of squats. I'm burning so much freaking energy. Quads, glutes, lower back, my whole freaking torso to brace, calves, every stabilizer imaginable. So there are a lot of sets of squats that I think get, you know, finished prematurely because the guy just runs out of breath. It might feel like he's, you know, oh, this is as much as I can do. But if the guy had better cardio, he'd be able to, you know, get some deeper breaths in during the set, and he'd be able to keep going a little harder. Not only that, but be able to repeat that level of intensity for the sets to come, you know, and not feel like he has to give up on the workout because he's just so freaking, you know, like totally out of it, right? So that's the actual in the gym aspect. Outside of the gym, on a baseline, changing nothing else about somebody's routine, anything, diet, their training or lack of training, doesn't matter. if you gave somebody 30 minutes of cardio, like real, they sweat, you know, they're not just doing like a 1 mile an hour walk on the treadmill. I'm like this is a real cardio session. Not high intensity, but intense enough. After a year, there will be a noticeable difference because their baseline level of body fat will decrease, you know, because if you're, look at the equation, man, you're burning more energy than you're consuming, at least, you know, potentially to a degree. So, you know, what's that going to do? You're going to have to resort to actually using some of your internal energy stores, aka adipose tissue, your fats. So bulked up or cut down, you're going to just be leaner. And in a dieting context, up or down, same sort of situation, you'll be able to just make quicker adjustments to your body composition because your ability to you know, either work with the food that you're eating or, you know, lack thereof in a dieting phase will just be better. You know, I can eat more food when I'm doing my cardio because I'm putting myself in a situation where it's like, all right, shit, man, I need more energy, right? I got to be a guy who can handle burning and refueling a lot of energy just because it's, you know, more of an athletic day to do cardio, crazy lift later, repeat. And as the fourth point, you're going to feel better about yourself because you know everybody else is skipping their cardio like a punk and you're actually getting it done. And that's not a negligible thing to say or a sort of thing to think. You know, there's a certain feel good of somebody where they're watching everybody take the escalator and they take the stairs. They're watching everybody just, you know, kind of just do run-of-the-mill whatever movements, and they're actually seriously bringing it, you know, because that's just confirmation that what you're doing is more difficult than what everybody else is putting themselves through. And it's kind of like a chip on your shoulder sort of motivation. You know, the fact that a smaller percentage of you know, whoever's into working out is even willing to do their cardio is gonna, I mean, it kind of makes you feel like you're in the in club because you're actually doing it and everybody else is slacking off. So that's how I feel about the matter. But like I was saying in the beginning, if you get to a point where it's just what you do, it's part of your day, you don't really treat it like a chore, it's just like, this is what I'm doing this morning, setting yourself up for success. Because then it's like passive income, you know? To have to go to a workout and have it feel like a chore, like you, that sucks, you know? That feels like you're forcing yourself to do it, to do it. But if you're doing it for fun because you like it, you know, it's like having a job you love. You're never really working. You know, that's my sort of outlook. Now, if you're doing like a quick 2-month, you know, 2.5 month, like, I don't want to say crash diet, but like just quick phase to lose some body fat, you're not going to be, you know, in an extended deficit, then I think you're totally cool. Right? Jump down, start losing weight. But if you want to get to a point where you're going to stay lean for a while, I think easing is definitely your best bet. And that's something which I kind of have a little bit of a better grip on now that I've done it. Same thing with bulking up in terms of, you know, not just chowing down on 1,000,000 calories instantly and easing into more and more food over time so you can really make use of it. So that's kind of been my change in ideology as of late. But feeling big, feeling strong. I think, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm like 70% sure that building up my squat strength has translated to additional strength gains just throughout my entire build. Probably because, you know, insanely, well, not insanely, but like pretty heavy squats, 4 reps is definitely kind of training up my, I don't want to say central nervous system, but ability to exert intensity, if I'm kind of getting that idea right. So the fact that just a couple of days ago I was doing insane squats, now, you know, you throw a couple plates on a bench or some cables on a pulley, doesn't feel as wild, right? And to an extent, I think that at least building up a good tolerance neurologically for, like, you know, just pain and effort and like pushing it when it starts getting tricky, that's not negligible, you know? As much as we're talking lifting wise, like, oh, well, you know, it's not about the weight, it's about how you lift it. Yes, very true, right? Like if I'm doing lightish squeezing curls, obviously I want to make them really good, have a good burn, like feel like I'm trying to bend my arm further than it can even go. But with just a heavy set where the difficulty is the fact that like even doing 5 reps is starting to get hard, there is a serious difference between someone who fails pre-legit failure and someone who actually brings it as hard as they can. And it's kind of an unfillable cup, because you definitely have more in the tank than you can ever really bring out when it comes to like at least a high rep set, you know. Because let's say I did what's a good style of set? Let's just say a squat. The squat's a pretty good indicator. You know, let's say I could do 10 reps and I don't think I could really do 11. I think I'm physically capable of doing 11, right? As a body. But, you know, your body's only being controlled by your brain. So if you've got like this just whatever, you might not be able to get that last rep out. But if that's the case, then the way I look at it is, all right, if you already can't hit real, complete, perfect failure because, you know, your brain's going to kind of hold yourself back to a degree, then why hold yourself back even further? You know, like the guys who really kill it, I think that they're setting themselves up for, if not more, at least a more potent level of success from their training, because they've just got more, oh man, they've just got a finer, maybe not a fine, what's a good kind of analogy here? I'm trying to think of something where it's like you're collecting gold. You know, the guy who is just going to do some scrappy sets, you know, he's just looking for straight up nuggets, right? If he sees one big chunk, he's like, oh, very nice. But, you know, the guys who really bring it on every single set, they don't really slack off on any of them. They give each one, you know, an amount of like value and attention that they all deserve. That's like someone who's really panning for gold, or they've got like a huge, you know, kind of, you know, filtering sieve machine like in real gold mines, where there is no waste. There is no just, yes, I could have got some more out, whatever. Like they're getting every little grain of gains that they can, and the only reason they're doing it is because they know that they want to. You know, it's not like an obligation. It doesn't feel like a chore. You know, they're bringing it because they want to bring it. You know, and that's the kind of lifter that I think I want to be. You know, because with the working out, the gains are probably threefold, honestly. Right? Physical size gains, which we all like. It's pretty basic. And then there's kind of like your mental toughness gains, and then just sort of a certain amount of, you know, contentness with yourself, where if you make legit progress over, you know, X year time frame, you know, be it going like a real bodybuilder route or getting like a huge body fat transformation, going from like extra heavy to now pretty lean, like you've got visible abs, like to have gone through the process of that, regardless of what your starting point is, you're just a different guy than most, you know? I mean, there's a reason like skipping the gym and not doing my cardio, that's not like a gym culture kind of joke. That's everybody, right? It's just a common kind of sort of point to just bring up. Everybody knows they should be working out. Everybody knows they should be doing cardio, not because it's some rule, but because they would just enjoy it, right? Apart from the fact that it's maybe a bit hard to do in the moment, you know? But it's like we all know it. We all know we should be taking our vitamins and just whatever. But actually doing it, that's a little different, you know? Because when you're a kid, or even a high schooler, right? This is why we bring up like the freshman 15, where as soon as, you know, guys go off on their own and you're no longer basically being catered to by your parents, shit, man, you gotta be responsible for your own build. You know? So that's my little shtick there, right? You got a body that demands physicality. At least bring it a little, you know? Break a sweat sometime. You don't have to be a crazy ass bodybuilder, but I do think everyone should be weight training, at least to some degree. You know, I mean, shit, man. Teenagers lift for free at Planet Fitness this summer. That's not a Planet Fitness promo. They've got their own problems. Like their hours are relative to any other like 24-hour gym, not awesome. But you know, if that's a barrier to entry, just do that. Or you could just make a bunch of fake emails where you do a Planet Fitness Day Pass over and over and over again. Maybe go to different Planet Fitnesses around your area, and so they don't catch you, and then never pay a membership. Right? I think that that method might have been patched, but I remember doing that sometimes when I didn't have one, but I wanted to go to a Planet Fitness, that sort of stuff. But either way, very good lift. Oh, yeah. Oh my God. That lift demands a post-workout nap. That is for freaking sure. But as excited as I am about being bulked up, after being extra lean earlier this year, I'm on the freaking lean pill. Now I want to get freaking diced again. But that's it's different for me to say that because I've already built up a substantial amount of beef underneath. You know, you gotta. There's a reason you say bulk before cut. But now I'm just busting out freaking whatever kind of one-liners come to mind. Either way, go hard, go home, repeat. That's a good mantra for anybody to live by. So either way, spotter, no spotter, you guys have got to squat with the safeties. I just don't understand the appeal of safetyless squats. Even with a spotter, I think out of all the lifts that I do, the barbell squat is probably the most dangerous in the sense that it has the highest capacity for damage in case something went wrong. Like I had a knee thing or I pulled something, just whatever, because at least adding the safeties on top of it, you know, even if I dropped it at full speed, the safeties are still going to catch the bar, and then, you know, I'll just kind of be, I mean, probably pretty freaking scared, but I'm not going to get crumpled, right? So that's, man, I mean, I've seen videos where guys have to dump the bar forward, or you're stuck in the hole and then you like launch yourself out by throwing the bar back. Not a situation I ever want to be in, right? I think the whole point of really leaning into the bodybuilding style training of, you know, strength, size, everything, is kind of an understanding that you are putting yourself in a position where you are exposing basically 95% of your lifts to like heavy and controlled loads. There's nothing about a bodybuilding style set that needs to be like extremely explosive with like a rapid movement. Not exactly, you know. Now, is that that's definitely a negative when it comes to overall athleticism. That's not the point. You know what I'm saying? So I do not want to have to like, you know, launch myself forward. I definitely don't ever want to, you know, be inclined and have to throw the plate over my knees or even dump it to the side. It would be pretty freaky because that's, I mean, that's scary too. So if I've got any 2 tips for you, if you're going to start, you know, really bringing it with your squats, it's for 1, use safeties, and for 2, always use clips. Because if you're squatting, I mean, I guess if you want to like get stuck in the hole and then dump it to the side and flip it, I still think that's pretty freaky. I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're squatting and you're doing a real set and then the weights start sliding sideways and the safeties are right there, dude, that weight is going to pull you over. You know, this isn't a Smith machine where you're locked in place. And yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. You know what I'm saying? As cool and freaking, you know, I don't want to say invincible, but just like tough as you know, I might feel when I'm, you know, repping over 500 pounds on squats. There's only one situation, or there's only one result when you put hundreds of pounds of steel and then my hands or my fingers in between the safety and the bar. That's only going to end one way, and I definitely do not want that to happen. So that's I know I might sound a little safety guy-ish there, but that's something I've only started to value more and more over time as I've gotten, well, not only better, but also more serious about working out. I mean, it's not like I've never been serious before, but you kind of get a certain understanding of like the necessity of longevity the longer you get into this and the more you have random tweaks and things, because then you learn your lesson and say, okay, I better not pull my hamstring again because it threw off my quad training for months, things like that. So as much as my priority is kill it like a beast, it's also do not hurt myself, because then I'm really screwed and I'm a total fool. So if you ever have a voice that's telling you, oh, you said you wanted to add a 25 and do 545 on that set of squats. I was kind of pondering it a little bit, but to my my better judgment told me, just do a 10, don't go too heavy, right? Ease into it. A set that you can do 10 reps or more of, I think is within reason in terms of heft, right? If you get to a point where you're going so heavy, you can only get 5 or 6, and you're like a more bodybuilder style guy. Obviously, if you're a power lifter, it's a little different because you're used to that kind of load. But if you're only used to 10 rep sets and you load up a weight you can only get 6 with, I think you're asking for a little bit of trouble. I'm not saying it's guaranteed gonna rip your pecs off or anything, but I wouldn't do it. I think that honestly 10 reps is probably the safest number in terms of heft. Or if you can get just about 10 or fail at 10, the likelihood of injury is probably within a safe threshold. I mean, some guys rip their biceps off coming up the steps sometimes, right? It just freaking happens. But you definitely don't want to put yourself in a position where you're more likely than normal, right? If you don't want to get hurt ever, don't come to the gym, right? Shit'll happen. But that's no excuse to make it happen by essentially self-sabotaging, because you want to impress that group of guys next to you by Smith benching 3 plates for the first time, or insert your own situation that you run into, because the coolness factor that you'll feel from hitting it is maybe 1/10 the scale of the regret factor of hurting yourself in the process. So just you want to be the guy who looks like he can lift a ton of weight, right? You don't always have to do it. I think that's probably at least a reasonable take on the bodybuilding endeavor side of things. So I think going forward, hams are going to be their own thing, but I really want to bias my quad growth. So I think I'm going to have to flip my my leg days upside down, because my logic before, which I mean to me it made pretty good sense, do all of hamstrings first and then do all of quads, so I can hit quads with absolutely no holds barred, totally bring it. When the last set of extensions is done, the lift is over. But I think the hamstring portion in the beginning is taken away from that quad intensity, and I want to be fresh so I can move weight around, not only for its own sake, but because like the fresher I am, the harder I can go on these sets. And the harder you can go on a set on average, the better those sets are going to be as far as I'm concerned. So if I can really bring on 6, 10%, 20% harder than normal if I do hamstrings first, I think that might be worth it. And then it'll just make hamstrings its own thing to be done after quads, which I think is probably cool, because relative to quads, hamstrings I would call the accessory muscle, right? Your leg's nothing without your quad. You could live without a hamstring, and visually it would look a little crazy from the back, but from the front, you have no freaking idea, right? The quad is the star of the show. So I think I should give it the respect it deserves and hit quads first, and then smack hamstrings around afterward. Because I like lighter squeezing sets for hamstrings anyway, with more stretch. So I think I think for this continual off season, I'm gonna swap them and really just annihilate quads first, and then don't even think about hamstrings until it's time to hit them afterward. But I mean, shit, I've been a diehard fan of the way I've been doing it for a while, because I mean I've been kind of on a kick of saying this, and I really think it's like the idea has more depth than at surface value. But what I'm getting at is when I come in to hit a workout, it's not like a powerlifting kind of approach where I need to hit 93% of my 1 rep max for 2 with reps in reserve, or like a 5x5 at 80% of your max, like things like that. I appreciate the just directness of strength training programs like that, because, and I think a lot of people also get the same thing, like they'll, I don't remember, or I don't know the names of any of these kind of classic programs, but like, name the one powerlifting program that you know, that one, right? They work, and it's of, you know, it's just because if you do everything that's written out, you are doing intense sets, but it's very clearly written out that you start in the beginning. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, I've never really looked at like a powerlifting program in depth, but you'll start with a basic, either testing your 1 rep max in the beginning, or just going off what you know your 1 rep max is. And then you've got this 8-week, 12-week program written out where it's, you know, lifts where each day you hit sets at a very specific threshold of what your maximum set, you know, kind of like weight is for a certain amount of reps. And I would imagine that if I did that in the beginning, I would be very kind of like, you know, locked into the idea that that's what works, you know, because it's all written out. If I follow the program, if I, you know, do everything that plan entails, then I will get stronger. I think with bodybuilding, it gets a little different. And by bodybuilding, I just mean lifting to get bigger and stronger. Not so much stronger, that would kind of get more on like the power building stage of things. But for the most part, just a basic lifter who wants to get bigger is a bodybuilder, right? He's hitting everything twice-ish a week, going nuts, right? Getting pumped up and growing. You know, that's what we're here for. But I think the lifting kind of has its own sort of mystique, because there's so many different ways to do it, and so many people get different kinds of gains by doing completely different things, that it opens up the topic for discussion of like, well, should I do this or should I, you know, we don't see that so much in the powerlifting space. You know, it's always like, you know, 5x5s, 80% of your 1 rep, 80% of your 1 rep max, or just, you know, whatever, and then the guy gets stronger, right? They do what they do and it works. You know, I'm sure they've, you know, I never get any, you know, TikTok feeds or YouTube videos more in the powerlifting space. I'm sure there's a lot of room for debate, but not so much as the bodybuilding, you know. So that's where I'm a bit more concerned with the idea of just giving myself maximal stimulation in the gym with not minimal, but with at least recoverable fatigue, you know, because there is a number where you're not really doing much good. If I came in here and I tried to do 50 sets of back, I think we can all agree that's going to be overkill. That will not do me any better. Potentially it'll do me worse than if I did 20 sets, or if I did, you know, 15, or, you know, like whatever. But the fact that it's not written out super clearly is, I think it's a little bit of a turnoff, and kind of turns it into this, you know, argument rather than like just actually kind of comparing people's progress and everything else. And it's also a different kind of progress vector, because it's not just your training. You know, like if I give somebody who's never worked out before basic weight training for a certain period, the guy's going to get stronger. Or if you gave someone a real powerlifting program, the guy's pretty damn likely to get stronger. But when it comes to size gains, it's not all training, it's also recovery and like food intake and making, so there's just a couple more variables, right? So instead of like a controlled experiment where, you know, the only thing that gets changed is like your training intensity or your calories or whatever, you're changing all sorts of shit at the same time. You know? So I think there's just a little bit more to think about with the lifting, where, you know, guys can fall into a rabbit hole of, you know, thinking any one way is better, but I think that's not a low IQ argument, but just kind of like unnecessary, you know. Like we're freaking out about whether we should do whatever, and I don't even like talking about it, because when I say this kind of stuff, I'm just playing into it, but I can't help but say it. It's like I'm getting rage baited by all of these, you know, like just, I don't want to say it specifically. Right? We get the gist. But all I'm trying to say is I'm going to stick with what I know works for me. Decently heavy pull downs as well as lighter pull downs with a squeeze and a longer hold. I've actually started to understand the value of like feeling a long stretch and a slower eccentric. Not on all movements, but with some, I really like it. Hamstrings, back, hamstrings, back, and triceps. Those are the sets where I really get a good connection. When I do a slow eccentric, I can really feel everything just kind of like burning and micro relax and just things like that. So that feels pretty good, right? But you know, all that's to say is I'm going to finish today with a pump, sweaty and hungry to get some meals in, and then go home, refuel, and continue the loop. So those are basically my check marks, or my check boxes that I want to check off, which will tell me if I'm on track or if I'm slacking off. So as long as I can get those 3 in on a near daily basis, sometimes a rest day is necessary, but as long as I can say I went hard, I went hard and I ate my food, that's basically it. You know, so don't forget those 2 things. No matter how intricate or simple you want to make your weight training, make sure you're going hard and eat your food, because those are kind of the biggest barriers to entry of, you know, accruing size. Because, you know, sometimes guys can lift crazy hard but they can't eat, or sometimes guys have a crazy appetite, they love to grub, but the working out, it just feels like a chore for them. You know, so if you can get those 2 in combination, right? I'm talking you got fire and ice powers. They cancel each other out and make each other stronger. You know, that sort of thing. So I think I'm kind of, obviously it takes a while to kind of phase out certain aspects of your training and phase in new ones, but I've gotten to the point now where I think there's definitely a place, maybe not the majority, but at least like a few 40%, 50% of my working sets where it's simply a controllable weight, where the set is made difficult by the weight's execution. You know, and obviously we've said, people have been saying this forever, you know, work the weight, don't let the weight work you, or just, you know, just don't lift too heavy. We get the gist, right? But yeah, I mean, just sitting there with an extra like 1 second squeeze and a slower eccentric into a whole hold, yeah, that has been feeling extra good. And for whatever reason, it just felt extra good today, you know. But I'm not going to go so far as to say I want every set that I ever do to be like that, because, you know, doing a heavy nasty set, or maybe not too heavy but kind of quicker set where you're not really going crazy slow and controlled, that feels really good too, you know. So I think all these different styles of sets have a place, and, you know, it's up to you to just kind of, you know, make sure you focus on the ones that will feel and just kind of be executed the best on whichever day it happens to be. You know, let's say it's a day where I can tell my forearms and my elbows might be a little tender. I'm not going to try to sculpt crush 45 pounds, or no, 2 45-pound plates on an easy bar. You know, it's probably not an awesome idea, right? But on a day where I feel like I've got freaking bulletproof joints, I'm not going to hurt myself, but I'll be able to bias some more, you know, potentially heavier sets, because, like, you know, you're actually like fresh and ready for it, right? So I think it's not an awesome approach to always be in like this, you know, soreness preventative method where it's like, okay, well, I don't want to go too heavy or I might feel it in my shoulder. Like, don't hurt yourself, but, you know, push it as hard as you can. You know, it's kind of it's sort of like a fine line you're aiming for. You don't want to go over, but you want to be at least close to it. You know, it's you're essentially an engine that has its maximum efficiency / kind of power output at like a certain RPM of intensity, be it like weight, reps, whatever. And you want to stay in that sweet spot. You know, if you go too high, actually, I mean, what happens? I get the gist that, you know, going into the red of your RPM would be bad for your engine, but like, what exactly becomes the problem? But either way, you know, if you go too heavy, that's a weight that you're not meant to operate at. And if you go too light, you're not really doing the work you could be doing. You know, so there's a sweet spot of effective weight. You know, And I think as a whole, as like a collective, we might consider effective weight a little lower than what it really is, just half because of like maybe a mental block, or like, oh, I know this is going to be heavy, I should stick with weights that I can really do, or just whatever kind of reason. But don't think I'm just a total ego lifter at heart, where if I see someone squatting anything less than 4 plates, I'm like, oh, that guy sucks. Or if I see someone curling anything less than a 50-pound, that's not what I'm getting at. I would say I identify most as an intensity-based lifter, right? In the sense that the harder I see somebody training, the better, right? That gets me excited. If I see somebody really bring it, I don't care if they're only curling the 20-pound dumbbells, that's going to make me say, oh shit, all right, I gotta step it up, right? I could watch a 13-year-old, well, let me imagine a more normal build. Let's say 16-year-old dude, 170 pounds, fresh into the gym, but if he takes the 30-pound dumbbells to like absolute serious failure on a set of curls, he's bringing it, and everybody watching him can tell he's bringing it. Dude, he could show me up with a set like that if I did a set with the 60s, and maybe I gave up at a little bit of a lower level of discomfort than he did, right? And the fact that weight is so relative too, I mean, it's like, try not to get so attached with whatever kind of number you're lifting, because at the end of the day, I'm most concerned with not hurting myself. That's up there. Getting a crazy ass pump, that's right up there, and going hard. So whether that spoken from the freaking great himself, whether that comes from the weight or the reps, really couldn't care less. I just want to make sure I seriously bring it, keep growing, and keep going. That's my mantra for today. But plan now, go home, slam some rice. I better tonight's the night to get myself a big ass salad bowl worth of ground beef prepped. I'm empty. If you want a protein hack, I can't get my protein in. Do you have cooked protein in your fridge at all times? If the answer is no, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? The easiest times it is for me to actually get all my kind of meals in is when everything is already cooked, and all that I have to do is scoop it out of the fridge and get it ready. Lay it on me. What's the secret? And obviously they're going to say, well, the secret is there's no secret. Lock in, go hard, we get the gist. Cardio, calories. But that's not fun. That's not a fun answer. So if I could give you anything that's a little more detailed or potentially eye-opening, I wouldn't say that the secret is there's no secret. I would say the secret, as much as I could say what the secret is between guys who really get after it and guys who don't, is kind of laid out in that situation as it is right there. So if you're looking around and everybody around you has similar level results, and they're all training in a similar way to each other, be it intensity, consistency, their just overall effort, their I don't want to say just drive, but like just how on it they are. If their level is right here, if you can bring it to here and keep it there, before you know it, guess what? The difference is going to be rather noticeable. I'm talking to a degree where it's like, they're going to come in and ask you, what kind of curls have you been doing, man? What kind of squats? And you're doing the same curls as them. You're just going harder. You know what I'm saying? So it's more so along the lines of, if you want to be, or if you want to get somewhere nobody's ever been, you got to do something nobody's ever done. If you want to be better than you've ever been, do something you've never done, that sort of thing. So let's say you feel like you're kind of plateaued, you've been at the same 225 for 10 for a while. What can you add? What can you pull out of your arsenal into your deck of cards that's going to make you have an advantage as a lifter? Have you been tracking your calories? Have you been making sure you get the right amount of proteins in? Have you been resting? Have you been training consistently? Have you been keeping a freaking jug of water on you at all times with some electrolytes so you can stay hydrated? Have you, just a million things like that. And for the most part, we all know them. We don't need them to be listed out. Obviously, train harder. Obviously, if I want to keep growing, I got to eat more and eat better, in the sense of like foods that are weight gain focused, you know, or just, you know, keep your energy expenditure up, add cardio, get more steps in. It's the answer's right there. The tricky part is, you know, there's a lot of guys where they're talking the talk, but you know, you put them behind closed doors, you have them come into the gym and do legs, and nobody that they know is there. Nobody's gonna know I skipped legs today. Should I just do arms? Yeah, nobody's gonna know. That's the kind of stuff that really makes up, I mean, what would you call it? 90% of life? You know, at least imagine like your own personal decisions. Let's just cut it down to like a day, right? How many things do you decide in the process of just a one-day span that anybody even really knows about, right? You decided to drive this way instead of that way. You decided to eat this instead of that. You decided to stay up this late instead of going to bed early. You know, none of it's policed, right? Assuming you're at least, you know, getting close to adult range or even like upper teenager, you know, you're not being babied, right? It's your life. You're literally holding the wheel. Whatever happens is kind of up to you, you know? So that's where I feel like you've almost got a certain, oh, that truck is like really smoking, but that's where you've got kind of like a certain, I don't want to say responsibility, but kind of like obligation to yourself, where it's like, all right, well, nobody's going to make my gains for me. You know, nobody's going to put me anywhere special. And I guess I may as well, if I want to, I may as well go for it, you know? And I guess it's probably true. Not everybody wants it, but that's not a cool way to look at it, you know? So how I'm looking at it is, if you've got the majority who want it, but aren't willing to do it, then that minority who wants it and is willing to do it is the group that you want to be in, right? That's the in crowd. That's the guy that he doesn't have to tell you a million times, my metabolism is getting in the way of my diet. I don't know, man. I gotta, like, a million different kind of excuses. The guy does a dieting phase and he gets diced. You know, it's not a question of if, because he knows that he's capable of doing it. It's not even something he thinks about. It's just how he rolls, you know? So that's the kind of lifter that I like the most, where the idea of their kind of just, you know, devotion and stick-to-itiveness to the things that they say that they're going to do isn't questionable, you know? It's not a question. That's how they roll. For them to do anything else would be strange, you know? And it's kind of tricky to get there, you know, because in the beginning, you might kind of, I don't want to say have to, you know, be like a poser, but people are going to look very differently at the 280-pound bodybuilder eating like, you know, a big bowl of just plain tuna out of a can with rice versus the 160-pound kid eating the same meal, you know, because they're going to look at the bodybuilder and be like, oh yeah, that's how that he's eating that because he's got to be on point with his whatever, and it makes sense, you know. But for the beginner, you know, you don't really have the results yet to kind of you know, prove that everything you're doing is working. So that's when you really got to kind of lock in the sense of, like, you know, if somebody talks smack on you, don't even register it. You know, you're doing what you know you're gonna do. Give it some time, right? Because before you know it, and I think everybody can relate to this, at least to a degree. I mean, think back when you graduated high school. Think back when you benched 225 for the first time. Think back to whenever. It feels like that. Like it's nothing. It just, this time is passing by at a freaking blistering speed. And, you know, some might look at that and think, or, you know, it's almost, it's kind of like a relativity sort of problem, you know. With things that are fun and enjoyable, it feels like they go by in a moment. But if you have a perspective that something is like just annoying or just feels like work or it's a fucking chore, then it's going to feel like it takes forever, you know. So for someone who's never worked out before, they're not really into it just yet, all they can see is the fact that it's going to take them years and years and years to reach the level of, like, you know, whoever guy they might look up to. Whereas I mean, whoever that dude may be it like a freaking Olympia bodybuilder, like I was saying before, or they would probably, I mean, I'm pretty sure I would not flip, or I would not blink before I flipped a switch that would let me go back in time and start working out all over from the beginning. Just because I'd be able to get to do it all again, you know. Plus, I'd probably be smarter anyway, so I would assume I'd get even better results than I managed to get on this first sort of go around, you know. So it's kind of just a mental training in a way to get yourself amped up and excited about the things that most people are going to be kind of turned off by, and extra amped and excited about the fun parts. You know, you kind of have to sort of raise your baseline level of enjoyment from, like, imagine this is 0. This is cool and fun. This is annoying and work, right? This is kind of like the natural order of things. When it comes to working out or any sort of thing you really want to get extra passionate about, you've got to raise the bar so that it's no longer like 50% positive, 50% negative. You've got to raise it so you're excited about every portion that goes along with it. So it's freaking 50% incredibly exciting and fun, and then the other 50% you're still looking at because it's fun, but maybe just not so much, you know. I mean, there's definitely a difference between 30 minutes of cardio and, you know, the pinnacle of everything, getting to freaking pose down or like go up on stage and just, you know, compete and things like that. But, you know, you gotta look at it like it's fun, right? If you're going on a family vacation and all you're doing is complaining the whole time, guess what? That trip is gonna suck because you're coming at it from the wrong mentality. So that's, I know that's kind of like self-help-ish, you know, speech, kind of motivational sort of stuff. But I really think the core idea of those kind of phrases can sort of just get you amped up in the right direction, you know. But don't overestimate what I'm talking about when I say a crazy set. You know, I'm not saying a set that is you know, completely beyond reason. I just mean a set that is pushing me to what I'm like probably damn near maximally capable of. You know, so if that's a crazy set of squats for 10 plates to failure, perfect. If that's a set of leg extensions for, you know, 20 reps with some partials and maybe some self-assistance, sweet. You know, or any combination of the two, leg extensions into leg press, maybe leg press with leg extensions as a burnout. You know, it's just either or. It's not limited to just one specific movement. But I kind of want that theme to, you know, transcend just one crazy, cool looking heavy set at the beginning and have that branch out into every other set, just so, you know, none of them really get neglected, right? It's not there's a certain humility you've got to have when you're looking at, you know, a set of hamstring curls in comparison to, you know, crazy heavy back squat, right? We're programmed to think that back squat is much cooler and much more effective, but don't get that hamstring curl wrong, right? If you want to actually get some sort of depth and grain and, you know, freaking tennis balls floating around at the back of your hamstrings when you flex them, and you can really see some detail rather than just have like kind of a, you know, chunk of thigh that you don't really think that much about, you gotta hit those hamstring curls with the same height or more. You know, so I guess that's kind of my main point. Even though some movements may feel like they're a little more in the accessory category, like, oh, you know, this is just light, this is a set I can, you know, keep talking to my buddy while I'm doing, and you know, not really pay too much attention of, maybe listen to a podcast. To that, I say no. Right? To that, I say get your headphones blaring with whatever gets you the most amped and stick with it from beginning to end. You know, that's easier said than done, right? I mean, some days you might be off, some days something just might not feel the same. Maybe maybe whatever. A million different factors that could come into play could kind of throw you off your game. But you got to at least go into it, you know, not even hoping, knowing that you're going to win, knowing that you're going to kill it, you know, and then if something else happens, shit happens, right? You never know. But you definitely don't want to go in prepping yourself to fail. And by fail, I don't mean like, you know, fail a set. That's what you should do. I'm talking like fail as though you've just given up. Yeah, this lift is kind of, You know, I've had days where I kind of made it extra hard on myself from being stupid, from like staying up way too late. I had an early flight or something, and then I did like a middle of the night workout, like didn't sleep. Not ideal. I think we can all agree with that. But I still went after it, and even after 2 or 3 sets, you know, leg curls, leg extensions, leg press, whatever, even though it feels pretty freaking rough, I'm like, oh. Some of those lifts I can look back on and remember them as being the ones that, oh, I mean, shit, I've done like damn near 25 or 2,500 workouts, and I still remember some of the ones where I felt like extra rough on. And what that tells me is I turned it around. You know, I can come into the gym and mentally be there, but physically, sometimes it might take a few sets to really kind of get into the groove of things, right? So that's where it's, you know, you never lose till you fold, right? You didn't take a loss on your stock or your crypto until you sell. And so that's where, sure, sets 1 through 3, maybe you didn't love the movement, maybe whatever, maybe you just, you know, insert whatever comes to mind for you. But afterward, keep going, trudge through it. Some of my best pumps have come after the lifts where the first 3 sets were, you know. So I'm not saying that happens all the time. Sometimes if the first 3 sets suck, the whole lift is I don't want to say a wash, but just isn't, you know, top tier. But the important thing is still going for it, as though every lift is, I mean, shit, take it to the extreme. Hit it as though every lift was your last, you know. If I knew I never had to squat again, or I would never get to squat again, I think that would make me do at least 1 extra rep. So actually, I better keep that mentality once I get in there and load the squat rack. That'll be a good thing to think. Thanks for yeah, that's one benefit of me doing these, getting a little prep talk every lift. I end up amping myself up. Now I'm getting extra excited to squat. Yeah, no, this will be sweet. No more talking. Let's make legs happen.